One of the fundamental theorems in distributed computing is the CAP theorem. And what it means is that there's a trade-off between consistency, availability, and fault tolerance. What this means in practice is that, let's say in the case of consistency, you can see that the same data is received for every request. In the case of availability, every request receives a healthy response. And in the case of fault tolerance, the system continues to function as messages drop between nodes. You can only have 2 to 3 of these. And in particular, from let's say 1970 forward, what happened was you would have consistency being really the primary driver of a relational database because it handled, let's say, bank transactions. And the trade-off, though, was a lot of times there were scale issues because you had to decide between fault tolerance or availability. A good example would be if you had a relational database and you had some read replicas that are associated with it. Well, the read replicas, if you call into these things, they're going to be highly available, but maybe the fault tolerance will be slightly changed because of the nature of how the read replica works. Likewise, in terms of consistency, because in the case where the read replicas are not getting the data at the exact same time as the write, you could get a slightly older version of the data because the read replicas are only copying the reads and the writes are happening slightly different. So there's a trade-off there in terms of a relational database. Things have gotten even further down the road of picking between consistency, availability, and fault tolerance with key value databases. And a good example of that is Amazon DynamoDB. And with DynamoDB, it's eventually consistent, meaning that it can scale out to any number of requests because it doesn't really matter if, let's say, 2 people visit a website and there's a slightly different piece of news with let's say 3 or 4 different words in it than the other. That's not that important to be consistent about. If they refresh the page, it'll update. Now, if it's a bank balance, that's a totally different thing. And that's why a relational database could be great for that particular scenario. So in the cloud, you have lots of different choices of how to pick between these 3 options, but you can't get all 3 at the same time.